For Schopenhauer, silence was neither surrender nor weakness. It was a weapon sharpened by the understanding that wisdom begins where words end. Schopenhauer's philosophy, steeped in a brooding view of existence, posited that life is governed by an insatiable, irrational force he called the will. This will, blind, relentless, and indifferent to human suffering, drives all desire, conflict, and noise. Society, in his eyes, was little more than a battleground of competing wills, a cacophony of vanity and triviality. In such a world, he argued, silence becomes the refuge of the wise, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of depth, a deliberate withdrawal from the fray to preserve clarity, dignity, and the integrity of thought. For Schopenhauer, the ceaseless chatter of society was not merely annoying, it was existential poison. Every conversation, he believed, risked ensnaring the mind in the petty dramas of the will, the boastful man seeking validation, the gossip hungry for scandal, the sycophant trading flattery for favor. Speech, in this context, became a tool of manipulation, a way to assert dominance or mask insecurity. Schopenhauer's disdain was rooted in his metaphysics. In The World as Will and Representation, Schopenhauer described reality as a dualistic struggle. The will, an unconscious striving force, and the representation, the world as we perceive it. Human interaction, filtered through this lens, was inherently fraught. Words often serve not to illuminate truth, but to obscure it, to prop up illusions, stoke desires, or feed the ego. Silence, then, was a rebellion. By refusing to participate in the charade, the wise could sidestep the will's destructive dance. Schopenhauer's era prized sociability. The rising middle class equated eloquence with intellect and gregariousness with virtue. Salons and cafes thrived as hubs of debate, where ideas were performative currency. Yet Schopenhauer saw these spaces as arenas of superficiality. To him, the crowd was not a community, but a mob, unthinking, conformist, and hostile to originality. His solution was radical disengagement. Silence became both armor and scalpel. Armor because it shielded the mind from the external racket of carriages, gossip, and hollow debates. Scalpel because it cut through the pretense of social niceties, exposing the rot beneath. In Parerga and Paralipomena, he lamented how noise, literal and metaphorical, sapped creativity. The philosopher, he argued, needed solitude not as a luxury, but as a necessity. Only in quiet could one hear the whispers of truth. Silence, for Schopenhauer, was not passive. It was an assertion of dignity. The wise individual, he believed, had no need to prove their worth through volubility. Ordinary people think merely how they will spend their time, he wrote. A man of intellect tries to use it. Words, when overused, became devalued, like coins passed through too many hands. The silent man, by contrast, hoarded his currency. When he spoke, his words carried weight. When he withheld, his silence commanded respect. This reticence extended to conflict. Schopenhauer advised against arguing with fools. To engage was to descend to their level. Silence, here, became a form of victory. By refusing to react, the wise denied their adversaries the satisfaction of provocation. It was a lesson he learned bitterly. His feud with Hegel, whom he deemed a charlatan, taught him that some battles were best fought in the margins, through ink rather than invective. At the heart of Schopenhauer's philosophy lay a paradox. The man who championed compassion also preached detachment. He urged kindness toward all living beings, a reflection of his debt to Buddhist thought, yet warned against intimacy. For Schopenhauer, silence was a means of self-preservation. To reveal oneself was to hand others a weapon. This wariness stemmed from his view of human nature. People, he believed, were fundamentally driven by self-interest. Even friendships were transactional, sustained by mutual utility or boredom. By guarding his speech, the wise man protected his inner life, a sanctuary of ideas and ideals untainted by external judgment. Schopenhauer's reverence for silence extended to art. He saw music as the purest expression of the will, transcending language's limitations. A symphony, he argued, could evoke emotions words could not name, yet to fully appreciate it, one needed silence, not just absence of noise, but a stillness of mind. The same principle applied to literature and philosophy. Great works, he believed, were born not in the clamor of salons, but in the solitude of study. This aesthetic of silence mirrored his ethical stance. Just as a painting required negative space to breathe, the mind required quiet to create. Schopenhauer's ideal life was monastic, a hermitage of books, free from the demands of society. His hero was not the charismatic orator, but the reclusive thinker, the Kant who never left Königsberg, the Spinoza grinding lenses in quiet defiance. Critics accused Schopenhauer of misanthropy. Nietzsche, once his disciple, later scorned his passive nihilism, arguing that silence was a retreat from life's vitality. Even today, his philosophy seems out of step with a world that equates visibility with virtue. Yet Schopenhauer anticipated these charges. Silence, for him, was not surrender, but strategy. In a society drowning in noise, the quietest voice often rings clearest. His legacy bears this out. While Hegel's fame waxed and waned, Schopenhauer's influence endured, seeping into the works of Freud, Kafka, and Wittgenstein. These thinkers grasped his central insight, that the deepest truths are often unspeakable, and that wisdom lies not in answers, but in the courage to confront the void, with silence as both shield and compass. Schopenhauer's secret was simple. The wisest stay silent, not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand the futility of saying it. In a world enslaved by the will's demands, silence becomes an act of defiance, a way to preserve one's humanity amid the chaos. It is not a rejection of life, but a deeper engagement with it. Today, his philosophy resonates with uncanny urgency. In an age of social media cacophony, where every thought is monetized and every opinion weaponized, Schopenhauer's call to silence feels radical. It reminds us that not all truths need tweets, and not all battles require words. Sometimes, the most profound statement is the one we refuse to make.